Good afternoon. I want to start by saying that this virtual program has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in these programs do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So let's kick off today's session by looking at our schedule. The introduction will cover the goals we hope to accomplish from today's session. We'll also define some terms related to Zotero and point out why the library advocates for this tool as a way to organize your research. I'll also do some live demonstrations and show you how to get resources onto Zotero in the Building Your Collection section. The third part of today's session will also look at features that assist with generating citations and bibliographies within word processing software. And we will end the recorded portion of the webinar with reviewing how to manage syncing in Zotero and how to use this to leverage collaborative bibliographies. Afterward, we'll open the floor to you for however long we have, about a half hour or so for questions, or if you'd like me to review anything that I had featured in this session. By the end of today's session, we'll have met the following goals. You'll be able to understand what bibliographic management tools are and why Zotero is a good choice if you decide to learn one. You will also learn how to add resources and build a Zotero library. And using those resources you add, you'll learn how to create and edit citations with the tool. We'll finally show you how to sync your Zotero library and why that's important. And we'll review how shared libraries work. Now, keep in mind that this is the initial overview session and is designed purely as that, an overview of all the features. There's a lot to cover, so we cannot go into detail with every aspect of Zotero with the time we have today, but future sessions examine those specific functions and features of Zotero. So be sure to sign up for those sessions for whose topic you want to know more about. So let's define some of those terms and get a sense of what Zotero is. Zotero is a bibliographic management tool. And you can see that I'm defining these tools as software that allows users to record references and create citations to assist with research and bibliographies. The references that these tools record can take on a variety of formats. They can be books, articles, videos, artworks, podcasts, primary sources, and other media and formats. And there are actually many different bibliographic management tools available. However, all of them have several common attributes that we're going to review. All bibliographic management tools should save you time, reduce errors, allow you more flexibility, and keep you organized. So they'll save you time by quickly allowing you to save your references, and they will quickly create citations and bibliographies from those references in your library. They also reduce errors in your work. They automatically track your citations, for example, eliminating the need to check if your superscripts are in the correct numerical order. You can cite the same source multiple times, but you only need to confirm that the publication information is correct once because the bibliographic management tools handles all that back-end stuff. They increase your flexibility, allowing you to create bibliographies that are aligned with many different citation styles. And you can easily switch styles in your manuscripts too. So for example, if your institution prefers Chicago manual style and you use that, but then you can easily switch it to APA if you're submitting it to a journal that requires that particular style without necessarily having to know all the ins and outs of how APA works. Finally, all bibliographic management tools should keep you organized. They should allow you to keep track of thousands of references, that to easily back up those sources, and to easily export them for other uses that you may have. And as I mentioned, Zotero is not the only bibliographic management tool out there. Wikipedia lists over 30, which they refer to as reference management software in this chart. A few of which, like EndNote or Mendeley, you might have heard about or used in the past. All these tools are useful, but they vary in a number of different factors, such as price. Some are free, others cost some money, sometimes quite a bit. Some have compatibility issues with current operating systems. There's a difference between proprietary and open formats. What I mean by proprietary is that companies do not share the source code for those tools. So you can't really make any changes or rely on a community to take the source code and run with it and make changes. Open formats you can. They also tend to be free. And there is a developer community that makes additions as needed. Bibliographic management tools also differ by their import and export features. So I'm including this slide so that way if after this workshop you find that Zotero isn't for you, know that there are options that may be better suited to your needs. And I would encourage you to explore those. This Wikipedia chart is a useful reference to help you make quick comparisons. And with that said, you will be sent the slide deck with annotations Friday at the latest Monday, but most likely Friday, so that way you can easily refer to the links and any other information that we mentioned during today's session. So with all this talk about bibliographic management tools, you might want to know at this point why use Zotero over those other tools. So my colleagues and I find that Zotero best fits the needs of most users because in addition to all the attributes that we previously listed, it is also free, scholarly, open source, and community driven. So what do I mean by all those attributes? Zotero is free. It offers unlimited bibliographic and file and data storing, in addition to 300 megabytes of free online file storage. I'll get into the difference between what those two types of storage mean later on in today's slides, but know that there is an unlimited tier for you to use. And you can also purchase more file storage if you need it. It's scholarly. So it was created by an academic institution, the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media, which is a research institution located at George Mason University. A few of you may be familiar with their other popular tool. It's the content management software Omeka, which assists users with building and publishing digital exhibitions. And the Frick has used it in the past to publish some digital exhibitions with the library. So Zotero is committed to really looking at the perspective of academics because it's created by this academic institution. Any features are given that perspective if they decide to implement new features with later updates. In other words, their interests are aligned with the scholarly community. It's open source. So as I mentioned before, that means that this tool is free. It will always be free. You will always have access to your data. Third parties will be allowed to continue to support this software if for whatever reason George Mason cannot do it. And it also allows other developers to work on plugins to improve and customize Zotero because the source code is open for them to develop. And when I say developers, I'm also including you because if there's a feature that you need, you too can also ask for it. Finally, Zotero is community driven. It's very popular. You can rely on the large community of users to assist with any problems that you may have. There are quite a lot of information in the Zotero forums. There's documentation on the Zotero website, and a lot of academic institutions provide really thorough libguides to help you customize Zotero to suit your needs. And you can also easily collaborate with other scholars using Zotero. So with all that in mind, we're going to go ahead and start the first of our live demos and show you how to build a library by adding records into the Zotero software that you should have installed on your computer. If you haven't installed it yet, it's not a big deal. Just refer to that preliminary documentation that you were sent when you registered, and you can install it and we can work through it at a later session. Right now, I'm going to demonstrate how to organize your library utilizing collections, tags, and finally, we will look at how to add notes, which supplements the references you collect. So I'm not even going to have Zotero open right now. The first thing I'm going to do is go to a library catalog, so that way I can begin pulling resources. And I'm going to use the Frick Art Reference Library catalog as examples. So here's Fresco, the catalog of the Frick Art Reference Library. And for this demo, let's imagine that I am researching Piero della Francesca, the Italian artist who the Frick had an exhibition on actually back in 2013. So I may start by looking for that record. And I do know that it is called Piero della Francesca in America. So here's the Piero della Francesca in America record. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Apologies. Let me go back. So once I have it on the record, I just want to note that the Zotero connector button that needs to pull this metadata information is already installed on your web browser, and is really the most convenient and reliable way of getting references with high quality metadata onto your Zotero library. This connector automatically finds relevant bibliographic information on the web pages you visit to allow you to add those references with really just a click of your mouse. So if we click on here, you'll notice that Zotero recognizes that this is a book. And so if I click on it, it'll save to my library. Let me just move this over real quick. And I'll explain what I'm doing in a second. And I've just saved it to my library. Let me go ahead and open up Zotero. And here it is. So keep in mind that I've been using Zotero since 2012, so I have a lot of references. Your Zotero library will look similar to this, just without all of this references. Don't be intimidated by this. You'll get there eventually. So I'm just going to point out the first things. The Zotero interface is divided up into 3 primary panes or panels. That's the library pane, which you see right here on the left-hand side. Then the references pane, which I have quite large in the middle. And then finally, there is the information panel right here on the right side. And they each tell you different things about the reference that you're looking at. All references live in your library. And you can see here that the most recent one that I added, Piero della Francesca in America, is right here. It gives you the date when it's added. The information panel gives you all of the relevant metadata that it pulled from that record. It tells you that it's a book, the title, various authors, and it also tells you that you pulled it from the NIARC Arcade Library Catalog, and it even gives you the call number that the Frick uses to catalog it. Notice that when I hover over these, all these fields are highlighted. All of these fields are editable. So if you needed to delete an author, you could. If you needed to add an abstract for your own notation, you can. One thing that I often use is the URL button. So Zotero doesn't save permalinks from catalogs, so I often find myself doing that. So if I go to the record, for example, I can easily copy and paste over into the URL button the URL. That way, if I ever need to refer to it again, I can just click on here and it'll take me straight to that record. In addition to that, Zotero can recognize different formats and changes the actually relevant metadata depending on the type of reference you choose to capture. So for example, continuing on this thread of searching for Piero della Francesca in America, let's look for a related video that I know exists about the exhibition. So I go to webcast lectures. Here's this lecture by Nathaniel Silver related to the exhibition. I'm going to click on YouTube so I can view it on YouTube.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome.
And rather than watch it now, because I'm talking to all of you, I'll save it to my Zotero library. Notice that the Zotero connector has changed. It now views this as a YouTube video. And if you click on that, it'll save it to my library. So this connector is really smart. It does detect what type of material that you're viewing and will pull out relevant metadata to add to that record. And if we look at the Zotero library, you'll notice that the item type has changed to a video recording, and the metadata fields have changed as well. We now have director, format. It gives us notes such as previously hosted on Vimeo, including the URL this time. So I can click on it to go back. In addition to video, let's go ahead and add a couple more records. We can add a journal reference, for example, which we'll do now. So let me go back to Chrome. And let me just go to JSTOR. And I know there's a really great article on Piero della Francesca and computer and art. I can't remember the title off the top of my head. Computers and Art History, Piero della Francesca and the Problem of Visual Orders. So I'm going to click on this. Notice that that Zotero connector right here now recognizes this as a journal article. I can click on this to save. I'm going to stop right here just to mention that I do have access to JSTOR because I'm at my library and I have those credentials. However, even if you don't have access, JSTOR will still save the relevant metadata. You just will not see the PDF. So, think of Zotero as a way to access materials that you'll see in the future as well, something that may look interesting to you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be strictly for research purposes. If I go to my Zotero account, for example, I have something that I call fan fiction, other things related to hiking that I find useful that I want to save for later. So, there are ways that you can utilize Zotero that aren't necessarily strictly research-based. For now, because we are a research institution, we're going to stick to the theme of using it for research. So we now have computers and art history right here. Note that it's a journal article. We have the title and all the relevant metadata that we'll need if we need to access it again. So the Zotero connector is not the only way to access and upload references onto your library. If you see this button here, there's the new item button, and this one here is the add item by identifier. We're going to go ahead and look at that identifier. If I click on that, it'll ask me to enter an ISBN, a DOI, which is for journal articles, or other type of identifier to help pull the relevant metadata and put that reference onto your library. So let me get that ISBN. Okay. So this would be, for example, let's say I have a book at home that I'm referring to. I don't need to go to a library's catalog and search for it and then add it via the connector. I can just hit on this magic wand button, use the ISBN, and as long as you're connected to the internet, it'll pull out the information, Piero della Francesca, artist and man. I'm going to add one more, a series of records all at once. And I think that from there, we'll have a good start to a reference library that we can use. So let me go back to Chrome. One thing that I often find myself doing when I'm researching is exploring subject headings. So I do have this great book that I'm going to be using as the basis for this research. If I click on the Piero della Francesca subject heading, I should get more related information. And I kind of want to get all the catalog resumes because I may not necessarily want to just see the works that are related to that exhibition, but I may want to see all the works that the artist has done. And if you're not familiar with that term, catalog resumes, it's a term that we use to talk about books that try to capture the total body of work by an artist. Sometimes it's also used to talk about books that capture all the objects in a particular collector's collection. And so we have this one right here, Piero della Francesca, catalog resumes. So it should give me all of the catalog resumes that the library has. And we have 5 of them. So I could click on each title, click on this, go back, and do it again. That's kind of a pain. Notice that Zotero has this little file tab. So it recognizes there are multiple records here that I can pull references from. If I click on that, it asks me which items I'd like to add to my library. And because we only have 5, I can select all. Sometimes if you're doing a general search and you click on that file tab, you'll get like 2,000 records. That's not the best way to use this. This is really useful for when you want to quickly add a limited set of records from a catalog. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as you can see, all 5 records have saved to my library. So let's see what that looks like. There we are. So our library is getting a little bit unwieldy. We need a better way of organizing our information. Otherwise, you're going to get what this looks like, which is just a lot of stuff and not a way of really finding it. So we're going to talk about the next aspect of this presentation, which is organizing. So Zotero offers several different options for organization. The first of which is tags. You assign tags to references to help you find those references later on. And all references with the same assigned tag will show up when you click the appropriate tag in the library pane. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean by that. So with our research, we really want to identify books that are specific to the Frick collection. We know that or references rather than books, because it could be video, it could be articles. So we know that, for example, that this is specifically about the Frick collection. So if I go to this information pane, notice that we have 3 other tabs: notes, tags, and related. If I go to the tags, I can add the Frick collection, because I know this is related specifically to that. You'll notice that there's some automatic tags, and automatic tags are highlighted in yellow. These tags are pulled actually from the subject headings that the Zotero connector senses. So you can delete them if they're not relevant to you. I tend not to use automatic tags, but you may find them useful. So let's go ahead and tag the Nathaniel Silver video with the Frick collection. And if I just type in it recognizes that I have this tag already, so I can just highlight it. And I can add another tag if I needed to. Let's say I just wanted to highlight all the video resources that I needed. And so now, if I go to this panel right here in the lower left, I have all the tags that I've built. Your tags won't be as quite a lot as I have, but they are all listed in alphabetical order. Right now, I have it so that way the automatic tags are not displayed. You can choose to have those tags displayed by clicking on this little panel button right here and choose to display them or not. I don't find them useful, so I just turn them off because I just want to see the things that I have tagged. If I go down to the T's, I can hit the Frick collection and I can get all the materials that I've tagged. The reason why they're showing up twice is because I previously added these records and they have the Frick collection in them already. So just to make things consistent, as you can see, I downloaded these at 1:27 and 1:21 p.m. respectively. Let me move those to the trash so that there's no confusion. So these are the most recent records. If I want to see everything in my library again, I can just hit the Frick collection and turn it off. And now it's showing all the relevant materials in my library. And of course, I have some other things. For example, all materials related to journalism and printing, which right now I just have 1 are there. Church and printing, I have 2 that I've tagged as that. And it's a really great way of organizing resources and kind of seeing sometimes putting 2 different types of resources together. All right. So the other way that Zotero offers you to organize your library is through collections. Now, these are hierarchical directories to sort references into various terms that you choose. The references work, by the way, exactly the same way that song tracks work when you create playlists in iTunes or Spotify. So all the references live in your library, as you've seen, and you can have the same reference in multiple collections. Now, collections by default are non-recursive. It's a fancy word that basically means that if you put a reference in a sub-collection, it won't show up in that parent folder. And let me explain all of that just through a demo of how collections work. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So these are all the collections that I have, and you notice the drop-down arrows show you that there are sub-collections. I can create my own sub-collection in my library just for Piero della Francesca, which I'll do now. And there are two ways to do that. If I right-click over my library, and I can hover and click on New Collection, or I can just click on New Collection right here, which is this little folder tab with the green arrow button. And it'll ask me for a name of the collection. If I hit OK, I have a blank space in which I can now put references into. So let me go back to my library. And I can either put references one by one here, or I can highlight multiple by highlighting one, holding down the Shift button, and then clicking on the group, and then just dragging that group over to the Piero della Francesca folder. And notice it looks like nothing happened. But remember, I mentioned that these references live and remain in your library, and you actually just drag them to the collections you want, and they'll show up there, just like a playlist would. So if I go to Piero della Francesca, you'll see that I have all of the references here as well. And I can move these to another one. I can move them to librarianship. I can create another collection called Piero and the Church. And if I wanted to move, let's say this one here, I can. It'll remain here, and then it'll also show up here. Collections can have sub-collections. So I can have a new sub-collection that I can just call, I don't know, Church and Printing, for example. And say that's the direction that my research ends up taking me. And I want it just to live here because it's only going to be relevant to Piero della Francesca in the context of Church and Printing. And guess what? I already have some tags in my library called Church and Printing. So I can move those to this collection that has the same name. And now they're there. Let's look specifically at the church, censorship, and culture in early modern Italy. It is here in the Church and Printing sub-collection. So you would think naturally that it would be in the Piero della Francesca's collection, but it's not. And that's what I mean by non-recursive. References live within the, or shown rather, within the sub-collection that you add them to, instead of being part of the larger parent collection. This is good for a couple of reasons. One, you can have just specific references to a topic that you're looking at. So that way you don't necessarily need to see unrelevant material. And that's really one of the benefits of having that. I'm going to go ahead and drag this into the Piero della Francesca collection. And now you can see it's in alphabetical order as a sub-collection. And if I'm not using this collection, I can just go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow to hide it. Notice that this is highlighted in blue. That means the next time that I add material or a reference to Zotero, it'll move into the Piero della Francesca collection. So let's just show that by going to Chrome and adding something else. We'll just go back to subject headings. And this Congress on some criticism looks good. And we'll just add that. Notice that it's now saving to Piero della Francesca. While this pop-up button is open, I can choose to save it to other aspects as well, so including my library. If I click this drop-down button, it actually shows me the full menu that I have, and I can choose to move it. And while I have this here, it'll actually move to the collection I pointed to. So that was a bit fast. Let me do that again, just as an example, and we'll choose this one here. So again, I'm going to click on the book to save it. I'll click on the drop-down arrow, and instead of saving it to Piero and the Church, maybe I'll save it to my librarianship collection and click on Done. If I go here, notice that it's moved over to librarianship, and here is the collection. So it does give you some flexibility there. Usually, best practice is really just to move it to the collection that you're going to use. Again, you may not have to use collections. It just depends on how you decide to organize your references. I know some people who just don't have any collections and just live off of the library like this, and then just use tags. So the last aspect of building your library I want to talk about is notes. So notes isn't a way of organizing collections. Rather, it's a way of adding context to the references that you add to your library. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you how notes work. Let's get away from my library. Let's work with something a little bit more simple. We'll look at the Piero della Francesca collection. And I actually have this exhibition catalog in front of me. And so let's say I want to add a note, a quote that is really relevant to my research. If I go to notes, you'll see that there's already a note here published on the occasion of an exhibition held at the Frick Collection. Well, guess where that came from? That note was actually scraped from the catalog record. If it's relevant to me, great, I'll keep it. If it's not, I can just right click and then move the item to the trash, which I'll do. I kind of want to keep my notes just that I create. All right, so I have this book open. I'm just going to type in a sentence. And since it's a quote, let me go ahead and be a good scholar, put my marks, and indicate the page that I got it from. Great. So notice that this lives inside this reference, so that way I know, sorry, apologize. So that way I know that this note is here, and I can refer to it later. And please excuse my terrible spelling. That's just a character trait of mine. Let me go ahead and add another note. So if I click on the notes pane, I'll just go ahead and go to add. And I'm just going to put something else in here. And of course, you can add, some paraphrases, your own personal thoughts, whatever you really want. There we go. Now, if you want to organize your notes kind of in a chronological order, which I like to do, all you have to do is type in 1 period. And now that's first. And I can go back and edit this note, type in 2, and it'll be placed chronologically. Guess what? This is a great way to make references for a research paper that you're doing or a larger thesis. This is in fact how I wrote my thesis, was looking at references, finding inspiration for things that I need, backing it up with relevant information from these resources, and actually writing out the notes because I couldn't take these books home with me. I had to use them at NYPL or at Pratt Institute where I got my master's degree at. So when a note is inside of a reference, the way that they are here, you can hide it. And these are often referred to as child notes. You can also add notes to a collection so that way this collection itself has a little bit more context to it. So if I go to new note here, I have the choice to add a child note or a standalone note. If I add a child note, it's going to add a child note to the highlighted reference. If I add a standalone note, it'll add it at top. And I can just generally talk about this particular collection. So. So now I have a sense of what this collection is about. And I can show you actually kind of what this looked like in more practice with my thesis collection. This is just a small sample from my thesis, but this is exactly how I wrote it. So if you look here, I have some items within my collection, but I also have sub-collections, chapter 1 and chapter 2. In chapter 1, I have a couple of references that I did use, and notice that I have a note here just to remind me that this chapter is going to establish precedent that artists were successfully able to change their status in society during the 16th and late and 17th century. And I also have a couple of child notes. And a couple here as well and here. And this word processor is kind of it's a really neat tool. Because you can bold, create a bulleted list, really do everything that you need. And then you can also just copy and paste that over to your word processing document once you're ready for that. So that's adding records in a nutshell. Again, this is going to be a broad overview. This is enough to get you really started, I hope. But let's talk about the second part of Zotero. And really, Zotero is divided into two main components, right? You really want it to do two things. You want to be able to save those references and pull those references into your library so you can consult and use for research. And then you also want it to be able to create citations and bibliographies easily when you're ready to actually compile your research into a paper. So Zotero is compatible with Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and Writer. Writer is the open source free word processor that is comparable with Microsoft Office and is developed by LibreOffice. They have a whole suite of open source Office software to use. I encourage you to use them. But today we're only going to cover how to use Zotero with Google Docs and Microsoft Word, since these are two of the most commonly used word processing applications. There's no need to install any additional software to make Zotero compatible with those word processors. The Zotero install is bundled with word processor plugins that were installed for each supported processor on your computer. So we're going to start with Google Docs. Let me go ahead and escape so that way I can show you the first paragraph of my thesis. Give me 1 second. And so I have this written down just so that way as a sample of text that we can already use to insert citations into. Notice first that there is a Zotero tool right here. And I'm going to go ahead and start inserting some citations. It's really easy to do. I need a citation here, for example. I'm going to click on Zotero and then hit Add Edit Citation. I'm getting a pop-up window right here. And basically, it's asking me, what reference do you want to create a citation from? I know the author from which I got this from, and you can see it pop up right there. I don't like this feature. I prefer being able to see my library and picking from there. So if you're like me, you can hit the Z button and go to Classic View. And you can see that we are here, and I can just use this Kubler article. If I want to see what my note looks like from here, I can see. I don't get the full extent of my note, but it does give me a good reminder like, oh yes, this is the citation that I need. And I'll go ahead and put the page number. Notice that in the page, you can choose from different segment formats. So it could be a book, column, figure, folio. We'll leave it as a page. And I believe this is like 457 or 451. It doesn't really matter for this example. Great. So we have the subscript. We have the citation. This is automatically, I have it defaulted to Chicago 17th edition. You can change that if you need, and I'll show you how in a second. Let me first add a couple more citations so that we have something to work with. We can add one here. Again, you're probably going to add citations as you write, but I just wanted something to work with ahead of time. And if you find that you prefer the library view, like me, there is an option under the preferences to change this to always pop up in library view. I just wanted to show you what you're initially going to see because it is defaulted to show this type of view. And we'll add this one, just say it's great. So we have 3 references, 3 citations. Typically, if you're creating this, you're going to want to create a bibliography as well. Let's say I just want to submit this to my thesis advisor. So let's go ahead and create a bibliography. For the sake of formatting, I'm going to insert a page break because I like the way page breaks look. Type this. And then hit Zotero and add edit bibliography. And now the bibliography is there. So 2 things to note. One, if you need to make edits to any of this information, you need to hit the Edit with Zotero button once you hover over it. That's because Zotero is linked to this account right now or to this document, and any changes that you make should be made with Zotero. So if I need to make changes to this, for example, and edit it, I could. That's not popping up right now, but it is something that you can do. Another thing that is really nice about Zotero is that if I need to add another reference, for example, I don't need to worry about numbering anything. I can just add it here. Zotero, add edit citation. Go to the classic view. We'll put something from chapter 2, page 12. Notice that the numbering has all changed. The bibliography has also been updated. Zotero offers a way to write longer notes in your citations, to compare 2 different citations together, to have a see as function as well. Those things will be covered in session 3 when we go over in detail bibliographies and citations. For now, I just want to get the basics of how to add citations and how to add bibliographies. Let's look at what this looks like in Microsoft Word. So I have Word open, and I have the same exact document. I'm going to add the citations. Again, notice that I have the Zotero panel right here, and I just hit Add Edit Citation. I get this window. We'll go to here, and I'm just going to quickly add citations without saying too much more until this is done. And for the sake of variety, let's just say I want a chapter. All right. I go ahead and make a page break. And add the bibliography. So a couple of things to note. This is also in Chicago 17th edition, but I have this set to be endnotes rather than footnotes. So that's why they have that subscript with the Roman numerals, and also why they come at the end. So that's not really the way I want it. I need to make that change. In Microsoft Word, you do that by hitting the Document Preferences panel. Notice that I can now do a couple of things. I can, from Chicago Manual Style 17th edition, I can display citations as footnotes, and that's what I'm going to do. Great, so it's back to numerating. making them in numbers, and then it has them as footnotes. Remember, I mentioned that Zotero offers flexibility. So you're comfortable with Chicago, your institution recommends Chicago, but the journal that you're going to end up publishing this is using, let's say, APA or MLA. You don't have to worry about that because if you go to Document Preferences again, you can choose one of very many standard formats for styling. And we'll just use APA for a little variety. Zotero does offer access to, I believe the most recent number is like 4,000 or 5,000 different citation styles. Can't imagine how many different variations there could be. And you also have the option of creating your own citation styles. We'll cover citation styles and advanced citation style features in session 3 as well. But here I just changed this to APA. Notice that the references have changed to reflect that, and that the bibliography has changed. I'll just show that in Chrome. It's basically the same thing. Zotero, document preferences, and we can change it here. And this is really the easiest thing. It's just so much fun and satisfying to see an aspect that I typically kind of dreaded done automatically by a computer. So the one thing, let me just go ahead and change this actually, because I don't like APA. I'm so comfortable with Chicago. I'm sure many of you are as well. Great. So let's say you've done with your paper and you're ready to print it, send it off. You want to do something called unlinking your citations. As I mentioned earlier, all these citations and your bibliography is currently linked with Zotero. So you can't make any changes here. Notice how this is highlighted. If you do that, you could end up breaking these links. So Zotero asks you to unlink your citations. And when you do that, you remove those field codes that Zotero uses to make those formatting changes. Once you do this, it cannot be undone. So because it's so important, I'm going to say it again. Once you click unlink citations, you cannot relink your citations. So you have to be sure that you're done with all your formatting and editing to before you hit unlink your citations. This is such a crucial feature that if you try to do it, you'll receive a warning from both Chrome and Word saying that removing these codes will prevent Zotero from updating citations and bibliographies in the future, which means you can't make those changes from APA to Chicago and back and forth. The best practice for this is to create 2 documents. One, the final document that you choose to unlink your citations, and you keep the linked version for as long as you need it. So that way you can easily make changes. If in the future you decide to expand on your paper or change some references, you can easily do that with Zotero because you have this still linked. So keep 2 versions, one that once you're ready to unlink, save it as a new version, unlink it, and then keep the linked version. Okay, I'm ready to unlink. And now I can make any changes or delete it. Same thing in Chrome. I go to unlink citations. Oh, it's having some trouble right now, probably because I was working on this earlier. But at that point, I would just need to close it out and restart again. But it'll give you that warning pop-up document, typically. So that is how bibliographies work. Let me go back to my presentation. Make sure I covered everything I need to. We looked at Google Docs. We looked at Microsoft Word, and we showed you how to unlink citations. So yeah. Now the final part of this session is looking at syncing and collaboration. This is going to be very brief and will be covered actually really thoroughly in session 4. I consider this kind of advanced level Zotero, but it's a good idea to get a sense of how Zotero syncs with its web servers, because you can actually have multiple installations of Zotero, and any changes you make in one library will be reflected in the other. So what do I mean by that? That means you can have a home computer with Zotero, your laptop with Zotero, and your work computer with Zotero. If you have registered for that free Zotero account that I had mentioned in the preliminary documentation, and you sync those with that web server, any changes you make in one will be reflected next time you opened up Zotero in the other one. And this is basically how it works. Let's say you add a reference to Zotero on your home computer, and you have Zotero synced. That change will be made in the Zotero server where your web library is. And then tomorrow you take your laptop with you to the public library because you have access to some e-resources there. When you open up Zotero there, it'll do a quick sync in the background and those changes will be reflected. It's a wonderful feature. It's almost seamless because it's done automatically. That being said, we need to talk about what type of information is synced between your Zotero web server and your home computer. Before I do that though, I think it's important to show you how to sync. So let me open up Zotero one more time. Depending on whether you have a Mac or a PC, the preferences panel will be in a different menu. You'll just have to look for it on a Mac because I can't quite recall right now, but it'll be somewhere here. I believe it's under like preferences or tools or something. For the PC, it is under, let's see, edit. Click on preferences. Notice that there is this sync button here. And you can choose to link your account. It'll ask you for that account that you created. It'll ask for your password. I'm already linked with my account, so I'm not going to unlink it. And you have the option to sync automatically and to sync full text content, which is not something that we've covered today. That'll be covered more in session 2 and in session 4. Zotero does have the ability to upload PDFs from e-resource sites like JSTOR, but that's where we run into that second problem of file storage. So click OK, it'll sync. And let's talk more about data storage and file storage, because those are two different things. In general, data storage refers to the information that's found within references. So it includes all the metadata on your library's references, any related notes that you make, any tags, any collections, any URLs that you add. So you can add as many URLs, as many tags, as many references, and Zotero will store an unlimited amount of those for free. So that way everything is synced between the two. The second type of information that Zotero stores is referred to as file storage. This includes PDFs, image files, any snapshots, or any other file that is not metadata. And this next slide actually will talk a bit more about the difference between the two. The largest difference, the biggest difference is how much you can actually store. So with data syncing, that reference library style syncing of metadata, that's unlimited. File syncing, you're limited to 300 megabytes of file syncing and storage, and that fills up very quickly. That's a few PDFs, you know? So what I do, and we'll go back to that preferences again, is that I really just use this to sync my references, and I find other ways of storing PDFs. In session 2, which talks about adding resources, we'll cover more about how to optimize PDF storage with Zotero, because there are workarounds. But in order to keep me from automatically downloading or uploading PDFs onto my library, I go to Preferences, and under General, notice that I have this turned off, automatically attach associated PDFs and other files when saving items. And that's important because that basically means you can use this forever. Lastly, again, really briefly, because this is something that we'll go into depth on session 4, Zotero does offer collaboration in group libraries. Notice that I have quite a few group libraries here. We use this for work, so I can share libraries with my colleagues and we can make changes to shared reference bibliographies, other work that we're doing that's relevant and that may need a bibliography. You can create private libraries, open libraries, semi-public libraries, and you do that all through the Zotero web library online. So we're coming to the end of our session. We have about 3 minutes before the instructional session is over, and I want to look at the future. Today we did our overview. We're done. Congratulations. You should have a really good sense of how Zotero can be used and be able to comfortably practice it. Remember, Zotero is a tool. You need to practice it. And the more you practice it, the easier it really gets. And you begin to understand how to adjust your own workflows and create your own workflows that really leverage the power of Zotero. In session 2, it's all about adding resources. We're going to take a deep dive into the Zotero interface. We're going to talk about extracting metadata from PDFs and optimizing file storage within Zotero. Session 3 on July 23rd, we're going to look at citations and bibliographies exclusively, go deeper into changing styles, look at the citation editor quite a lot more deeply, and talk about making manual edits while still having your citations linked. The last session is all about syncing and collaboration. We'll look at syncing preferences. We'll show you how to restore your local Zotero library in case something happens, or let's say your computer crashes. And we'll show you how to create group libraries to collaborate with your colleagues with. Each session is about 30 to 40 minutes. It's just enough to really get you excited about what's coming next. Sometimes these options and these features are kind of hidden, and so it's a really nice discovery. All of these you can see more on using these resources here. I've highlighted a couple in this page, including a really great LibGuide. Again, I'm going to send you the slide deck tomorrow, so that way you'll have access to this information. With that in mind, I want to thank you for attending the recorded instructional portion of this session. As a reminder, thanks to the National Endowments for the Humanities, and any views, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this program don't reflect those or represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities.